Don't take the highway tonight. Go the long way. And when you get home, don't turn on any lights." She said it quietly, like she was telling me the time. Her hand was rough when she pressed my parking ticket back into mine. I dropped it in the elevator lobby of the parkade. Too distracted fumbling with my laptop bag and my phone and the dry cleaning I'd been meaning to pick up for 2 weeks. She was maybe 70, maybe older, wearing a transit authority vest that looked 2 sizes too big. She didn't explain. She just looked at me with this expression I can't quite describe. Not pity, not urgency, something more like certainty, and walked away toward the stairwell. "My name is Nora." Wait, I already broke my own rule. I don't use names anymore when I tell this story. I'm 32. I'm a licensed paralegal at a mid-sized firm in Mississauga. I am, by every reasonable measure, a practical person. I track deadlines for a living. I draft affidavits. I know exactly what constitutes admissible evidence and what gets thrown out. I do not, under any circumstances, take directions from strangers in parking garages. Except that once I did. It was a Thursday in late October, just after 6. I'd worked through lunch, and my back hurt, and I had a chicken thawing at home that I needed to deal with before my fiancé got there at 7:30. We'd been together 4 years. We were getting married the following June. I had a dress fitting booked for the second Saturday of November, a florist consultation on the books, and a spreadsheet, yes, a spreadsheet, for vendor deposits. My life had a shape, a structure. I liked it that way. I stood in that parkade lobby for probably 30 seconds after she walked away. The fluorescent light above me flickered. My car was on level 3, in my usual spot. The highway home takes 22 minutes on a good night. The side roads take 40, sometimes 45. I had a chicken to cook. I took the side roads. I told myself I was being ridiculous the entire way home. I told myself I'd probably misheard her, that she'd said something mundane. Don't block the highway, or don't miss the light. Some fragment of normal conversation I'd grafted a meaning onto because I was tired and hungry, and apparently losing my grip. I drove through Streetsville with all the lights catching me, and I thought about how much I'd love a glass of wine when I got home. I pulled into the driveway at 6:52. The house was dark. My fiancé wasn't supposed to be home yet. I almost unlocked the front door. Then I remembered, don't turn on any lights. I sat in my car instead, engine off. Not entirely sure why. The neighborhood was quiet the way October is quiet. Leaves on the pavement, one porch light down the street. The faint smell of someone's fireplace through my cracked window. After about 10 minutes, I started to feel genuinely stupid. I had groceries in the back seat. I had a chicken. I reached for the door handle. That's when his car turned onto our street. My fiancé drove a black Mazda. I knew the sound of it, but this wasn't that. This was a white SUV I didn't recognize, and it pulled directly into our driveway behind me without pausing. Like whoever was driving knew exactly where they were going. I watched in my rearview mirror. My fiancé got out of the passenger side. He had his keys out. He opened our front door. A woman got out of the driver's side. I knew who she was. I'd been introduced to her at a work event my fiancé had brought me to in September. She worked in his department. She had a laugh I remembered finding warm. I told him she seemed nice. They went inside without turning on the lights. I don't have a word for what I felt in that moment. It wasn't heartbreak, not yet. It was more like the floor had just confirmed it was made of glass the whole time, and I'd simply never looked down. I sat in my car and I breathed. In through my nose, 4 counts. Out through my mouth. Something I learned from a therapist I saw briefly after my dad died, years ago. It works for grief. It turns out it works for this too. I got out of the car very slowly, very quietly. I did not slam the door. I stood on the cold pavement in my work flats and thought, with total clarity, what do I actually know right now? And what can I prove? Because here's the thing about being a paralegal. You stop reacting and you start building a record. I went around the side of the house to the back garden. We had a ground floor window in the dining room that had a broken latch. My fiancé had been meaning to fix it for 6 months and never did. I slid it open silently the way I used to crawl back in after curfew when I was 17, and I stood just inside in the dark and I listened. They were in the kitchen. I could hear cabinet doors, the familiar complaint of the drawer that stuck, the sound of a wine bottle being opened. His voice, easy and relaxed in a way it hadn't been with me in months. Her voice, lower than I expected, intimate. "She won't be back until at least 8, he said. "She always works late on Thursdays." A small, satisfied sound from her side of the room. "And she doesn't know?" "She doesn't know anything." His voice had something in it I'd never heard before. Or maybe I had and I'd been calling it something else. Something fond, almost. "She's been so caught up in the wedding planning, she signs whatever I put in front of her." Something cold moved through my chest. "The joint account," he continued, and I heard the pop of a cork, "is already set up. I moved the first transfer last week." She thought it was the deposit for the venue. It was. I had thought it was the venue deposit. We'd talked about it. I had thanked him for handling it because I'd been slammed at work. "And the rest?" Her voice. "After the wedding, everything's joint. Her savings, her TFSA, the RRSP she's been building since she was 24. Once she's my wife, it's marital property. And then it's just a matter of time." A matter of time. I stood in my dark dining room in my coat and my work flats, and I thought about the documents I'd signed in the last 3 months. The joint account application, a beneficiary update for my life insurance policy, a form my fiancé had told me was a standard pre-marriage financial disclosure. He'd explained it patiently, said it was just a formality, said his cousin who was a financial planner had recommended it. I'd signed it over dinner. I'd barely read it. "She trusts you completely," the woman said. It wasn't a compliment. "She does," he agreed. "She always has." I heard them move toward the living room, the same couch I'd bought at a West Elm in Oakville, 18 months ago. The couch I'd spent 40 minutes agonizing over in the showroom because of the color. I heard him say something I couldn't quite make out. And then her laughter, easy and settled, like she was already comfortable in a space she intended to occupy. I did not walk into that room. I am not the kind of person who performs a confrontation in the dark for an audience of no one. I thought about every client file I'd ever worked on, where the person who walked in swinging lost everything, and the person who documented quietly won. I went back out the window. I closed it behind me. I sat in my car and I opened my phone, not to call anyone, to record. I turned on the voice memo app and set my phone on the dashboard. Then I opened the Notes app and I started a timeline. 6:52 p.m. Arrived home, fiancé not present. 6:54 p.m. Observed fiancé arrive in unknown vehicle with female colleague from firm name. Both entered residence without activating lights. I wrote down her name, her license plate, which I photographed from where I sat. I wrote down verbatim what I remembered of the conversation, in quotation marks, with the timestamp of when I'd heard it. I noted the specific reference to the TFSA, the RRSP, the joint account transfer, the life insurance's beneficiary update. Then I called my mother, not to cry, to ask her a very specific question. Did she remember where I'd filed the folder of financial documents from the last year? She did. It was in the second drawer of the filing cabinet in my old bedroom at her house in Brampton. I'd left it there after Dad's estate was settled and never moved it. I'd put my original TFSA statements in there, my RRSP confirmations, copies of my insurance policy before any amendments. "Can you photograph everything in that folder and send it to me tonight?" I asked. She paused. "What's going on?" "I'll explain tomorrow," I said. "Please, Mom." She did it within the hour. At 8:06 p.m., I texted my fiancé. "Running late, got pulled into something at the office. Don't wait on dinner." His response came back in under a minute. "No worries, I'm just home now. Take your time." He'd been in my house for over an hour. He told me he'd just arrived. I screenshotted it. I sent it to my own email with a subject line that read only, "Keep this." I drove to a Tim Hortons on Huron, Ontario, and sat in a corner booth with a large dark roast and my laptop, and I stayed there until 11:15, building a file. I pulled up the financial institution's app and I went through every transaction in the joint account. There were 4 deposits I hadn't made and couldn't account for. I flagged them. I went through the account documents and found the beneficiary update he'd gotten me to sign. He was listed as sole beneficiary of my life insurance policy, a policy I'd taken out at 26 after a coworker's sudden death scared all of us into being responsible adults. The payout was $400,000. I photographed every screen. I emailed everything to myself. Then I called a paralegal colleague I trusted, not from my firm, a woman I'd met at a Law Society event 2 years ago who now worked at a family law firm in Hamilton. It was late. She picked up anyway. "I need to ask you something hypothetically," I said. "Sure," she said, in the tone that told me she already knew it wasn't hypothetical. I walked her through it, the financial documents he'd had me sign, the joint account, the beneficiary change. The transfer I'd been told was for the venue. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Do you have the originals of what you signed? Getting them photographed as we speak." "Good. Don't touch any of the joint accounts tonight, and don't confront him." "I know. Do you have a family lawyer?" I didn't, but I knew one. My firm handled a lot of estate work, and we referred regularly to a family law firm in Mississauga, Kellerman and Associates, a partner there named Sinclair, who I'd crossed paths with at client meetings enough times to have her card. I'd never expected to need her for this. I emailed Kellerman and Associates at 11:47 p.m. I kept it brief and factual. I listed the relevant documents, attached the photographs my mother had sent, and summarized the financial movements I'd identified. I said I needed a consultation as soon as possible. I said I believed there may be financial manipulation, and that I had concerns about the nature of a recent insurance beneficiary change. I used the language I knew would make someone read it first thing in the morning. I drove home at midnight. My fiancé was asleep. I lay on my side of the bed with my eyes open, and I thought about the woman from the parking garage, her transit vest, her rough hands, the particular flatness in her voice when she said, "Don't turn on any lights." Like she knew exactly what would happen in the dark. I got up at 5:30. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table while he slept, and I read through the document he'd told me was a standard financial disclosure. It wasn't. It was a consent to add him as co-owner of my RRSP account. I'd signed it. My handwriting was right there at the bottom. I photographed it and added it to my file. At 7:15 a.m., I received an email back from Kellerman and Associates. Sinclair could see me that afternoon at 2. At 7:22 a.m., I texted my fiancé, "Morning. Don't forget we have the florist at 6 tonight." At 7:23 a.m., he texted back, "Can't wait. Love you." Panic performs normalcy very convincingly right up until it doesn't. I went to work. I told no one. I answered emails. I reviewed 2 affidavits. I ate my lunch at my desk, and I did not let my hands shake. At 1:30, I told my supervisor I had a personal appointment, and I drove to Kellerman and Associates on Huron, Ontario, which was 12 minutes from our office, and I sat across from Sinclair, who was unhurried and precise in the way that good family lawyers always are, and I put everything on the table. She went through it methodically, the documents I'd signed, the financial movements, the timeline. When I described the conversation I'd overheard, she wrote down key phrases without reacting, just asking occasional quiet questions. She noted that the consent to add him as RRSP co-owner was almost certainly invalid. There are strict rules around registered accounts in Canada and what can and cannot be signed over, and that the life insurance beneficiary change might be challengeable depending on the circumstances and documentation. She said the joint account transfers were a potential matter for both the financial institution and potentially the police, depending on whether I could establish the money had been moved under false pretenses. "Do you want to end the engagement?" she asked. I want to do it correctly, I said. She nodded once, like that was the right answer. She drafted 2 letters while I sat there. One to the financial institution, flagging potential financial manipulation and requesting a freeze on joint account activity pending review. One to the life insurance provider, requesting a hold on any beneficiary changes and noting that the recent amendment may have been signed under false or misleading circumstances. I signed them and she faxed them before I left. I sat in my car outside her office and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Steady. Not fine. Not okay. Steady. Like the ground was something I could trust again now that I'd built something solid under my feet. I drove home. I cooked dinner. Butter chicken, his favorite, which I noted with a kind of cold interest. He came home at 6:45 and told me the florist had canceled and we could reschedule. Said it with a smile. Easy and warm. We ate dinner at the kitchen table and he talked about his day. And I listened and I answered and I watched him very carefully. At 9:20 p.m., with him in the shower, I went to the dining room window and I checked the latch. I pulled it closed properly, the way it should have been closed all along, and I wedged a piece of folded cardboard under the frame the way I knew would keep it sealed. Not for him. For me. Because I was done leaving things open. I sent one message that night to my mother. It said, "I need you to keep that folder somewhere safe for me. Don't tell anyone it exists," she replied. "Okay, are you safe?" I thought about that for a moment. "Yes," I wrote. "I'm just not finished yet. What happened over the next 11 days, I can only describe as watching a building that was already condemned begin to come apart, floor by floor." The financial institution flagged the account the following morning. He discovered this when he tried to initiate another transfer, one I hadn't known about, and found his access suspended. He called me at work asking if something was wrong with my banking app. I told him I hadn't had any issues and suggested he call the bank directly. He said he would. He sounded slightly too casual. The life insurance provider sent a letter to our shared address. Mine. Technically, the house was mine, another detail I was grateful for now, noting that the recent beneficiary amendment was under administrative review. He intercepted the letter. I know because I'd already set up mail forwarding for anything insurance related to my mother's address. And when the forwarded copy arrived, the envelope had been opened and resealed with a strip of tape that didn't match any tape I owned. I took photographs and added them to the file. He began doing something I recognized from every difficult client situation I'd ever worked on: overcorrecting. Bringing me coffee in the mornings, asking about my day with a specific and slightly effortful interest. Suggesting we book a venue visit that weekend. He was recalibrating, trying to identify what had changed, finding the edges of the thing he couldn't see. On the 7th day, he came home agitated. He said the financial institution had called him with questions about the account activity. He said it was probably just routine. He said these things happened with joint accounts sometimes. It was bureaucratic. It was nothing. He watched me while he said it. "That does sound frustrating," I said. "Do you want me to call them with you tomorrow? Since it's a joint account, maybe if we both call it goes faster." He said that would be great. He relaxed slightly. He poured us both a glass of wine. I called my contact at the financial institution the next morning, alone, and confirmed they had escalated the review to their fraud department. On the 9th day, Sinclair emailed me with an update. The insurance provider had confirmed the amendment had been flagged and temporarily reversed pending investigation. My original beneficiary designations, my mother and my younger sister, were back in place. I cried in my car in a parking lot in Cooksville for about 4 minutes. Not from sadness, from something that felt like release. On the 11th day, I asked my fiancé to meet me for lunch near his office. A faux place we both liked, neutral ground, public. He came in smiling, the particular smile that I now recognized as the one he kept polished and ready. I waited until we'd ordered. "I need to tell you something," I said. He waited. I know about the accounts. The smile didn't disappear immediately. That's the thing about practiced liars. The response takes a half second longer than it should, like they have to select it from a menu. What do you mean? I know about the RRSP consent form. I know about the 3 transfers. I know about the beneficiary change. And I know about her. He opened his mouth, closed it. I was home on Thursday night, I said. The week before last. I heard your conversations. Nora. He stopped. He'd used my name. He almost never used my name. I've already spoken to a family lawyer, I said. The financial institutions have already been notified. The relevant documents have been reviewed by people who understand exactly what they mean. I'm not here to negotiate. He leaned forward, voice dropping. You don't understand the full picture. I understood enough, I said. He sat back. Something shifted in his face. The polish came off, just for a moment, and what was underneath was something smaller and less sure of itself than I'd expected. What are you going to do? I already did it, I said. I left cash on the table for my soup, and I left him sitting there. I walked to my car. I drove back to work. I answered emails for the rest of the afternoon, and then I went home and I changed the locks. A locksmith I'd booked 4 days earlier, who came at 5:30, efficient and without curiosity, and I sat on my West Elm couch in the October dark, and I let myself feel all of it at once. The engagement ended formally through Sinclair's office. There's a process for these things, and I was grateful to have someone who knew it standing between me and the paperwork. The joint account was closed, the funds returned to their original source. The fraudulent financial documents were submitted to the relevant regulatory bodies. That process is still ongoing and is not mine to describe in detail. He moved out of my life with less noise than I expected. People who rely on the compliance of others don't have much left when the compliance is gone. I never found the parking garage attendant again. I've walked through that lobby dozens of times since. I've looked. The transit authority has no record of a staff member matching her description. The lot is managed by a private company, and their HR team, when I asked somewhat embarrassingly, confirmed no employees of her description were scheduled that evening. I don't know what she was. I've stopped needing to. What I know is that she handed me back something I'd dropped, and she told me to take the long way home. And for whatever reason, instinct, exhaustion, some quiet part of my brain that had been trying to tell me something for months. I listened. I still drive the long way sometimes, even when I don't have to. There's a stretch through Streetsville where the maples go orange in October and the speed limit drops to 40 and nobody's in a hurry. I roll my window down. I think about how close I came to being a different story entirely. One where I was the last to know, where I signed the last form, where I took the highway home. I didn't, though. And here I am,